What if the player the Celtics let go ends up becoming the surprise steal of the year? That's the question no one expected to ask about Jaden Springer, a name that barely rippled through headlines when Boston moved on from him. But now, with a fresh opportunity in New Orleans, the narrative is shifting. And fast. Springer's journey has been anything but conventional. In the span of just 6 months, he's cycled through for teams, been caught in the crossfire of salary dumps, roster log jams, and backcourt overflows. Most fans didn't blink when the Celtics shipped him out in a deal that felt more like financial housekeeping than a calculated basketball decision. But here's where things start to get interesting. After being waived by the Utah Jazz just days before a $400,000 guarantee on his contract was about to activate, Springer could have disappeared into obscurity. But instead, he landed in New Orleans, and that changes everything. The Pelicans may seem like a long-shot destination at first glance, but timing is everything in the NBA, and right now, they are vulnerable, with DeJounte Murray out with a torn Achilles. A spot in the rotation has cracked wide open. Springer walks into a roster where suddenly every practice matters and every preseason game could tilt the scale in his favor. He is not a household name, but his skill set could fit the chaos brewing in New Orleans. Let's not pretend Springer is a polished offensive machine. He isn't. But what if that's not what matters here? What if his elite on-ball defense, something Celtics insiders praise despite his limited usage, becomes the exact tool the Pelicans need in a rotation filled with offense-first guards like Jordan Poole and Hawkins? Can he be the one to neutralize opposing second units and inject toughness into a backcourt built more for flash than grit? Here's where Celtics fans should start paying attention. Yes, Springer was a minor piece on a championship roster. He barely cracked the box score. But his role in practices, his work ethic behind the scenes, and his defensive presence were not lost on those inside the locker room. Championship teams don't carry dead weight. Boston saw something when they spent a second-round pick to acquire him. That glimpse may now have the space to evolve into something more. There's also a deeper layer to this move. Joe Dumars, the newly appointed president of basketball operations in New Orleans, is not in the habit of wasting roster spots. He comes from a culture built on hard-nosed defense and team-first basketball. Springer fits that mold. Could Dumars see in Springer what the Sixers, Rockets, and Jazz missed? Could this be one of those low-risk signings that shifts the trajectory of a young player's career? And here's a spicy thought. If Springer carves out a meaningful role in New Orleans and helps them stabilize during Murray's absence, would Boston eventually regret moving off of him too soon? Would it sting more knowing that the Celtics themselves believed in his potential enough to bring him in mid-season, only to let him walk away in a cap-clearing move? Sometimes the players with the roughest starts turn into the biggest surprises. Look across the league. The names who've been waived, cut, doubted, and buried only to resurface in exactly the right moment and shock everyone. Is Springer the next chapter in that legacy? One thing is certain. This move is more than a footnote. It's a chance, and if Springer seizes it, he might just become the story no one saw coming. So what happens if Jaden Springer finds his rhythm in New Orleans? What if the Celtics gave up on a weapon they never fully unleashed? The season ahead will answer that, but until then, the door is open, and Springer has every reason to kick it down. Did the Spurs secretly hand Boston a future Finals MVP in disguise? That's what the league is starting to whisper as more details emerge about the 2022 trade that sent Derek White to the Celtics, a move that at first glance looked like a standard deadline deal but now feels eerily prophetic. And when the mastermind behind the move is Greg Popovich, nothing is ever just a coincidence. In the first episode of his podcast White Noise, Derek White finally peeled back the curtain on how the trade happened, and it wasn't your typical NBA transaction story. Picture this: trade deadline chaos, players glued to their phones, and suddenly Popovich walks into Derek White's room without warning. The moment could have been clinical or cold. Instead, it was calculated and deeply personal. Pop knocks, sits down, and says, "Hey, we traded you." White recalled, still stunned. "I'm like, to where?" And he just says, "We wouldn't have you. We sent you to Boston." It was more than a trade. It was a passing of the torch. It was a statement. Boston wasn't just another team. It was the team Popovich trusted with the next chapter of White's career. And now, years later, that gut instinct looks like genius. Let's zoom out. San Antonio didn't just move White to shed salary or make room for younger guards. They strategically planted him in an environment where he could evolve without the spotlight suffocating him, where his quiet fire, His relentless defense and high IQ would finally be noticed. Not just appreciated by coaches, but weaponized on the biggest stage. What happened next? White thrived. He didn't just find a role, he defined one. He became the Celtics' defensive brain, the glue between Tatum and Brown, the engine that never asked for the spotlight but somehow stole it in the biggest moments. And he delivered something that can't be measured on a stat sheet. Championship. Poised. Now, here's where the story bends expectations. Celtics fans celebrated the deal, sure, but how many truly understood what Boston gave up? Romeo Langford, gone. Josh Richardson, aged out. Blake Wesley, traded for a rotation big. The Spurs return, a handful of now empty boxes, and the infamous 2028 first-rounder. By then, Boston's core could still be rolling. Tatum will be 30, and the Celtics may still be title hunting. But here's the deeper question. Did the Spurs want those assets to flourish? Or was the trade designed with another purpose entirely? Because in hindsight, Derek White's departure helped San Antonio plummet just far enough to land a generational prize. Without shedding those wins, without clearing that backcourt, do the Spurs draft Victor Wembanyama? Was Derek White part of the blueprint not just for Boston's success, but for San Antonio's long game? Think about that, a single trade that helps the franchises chase titles in radically different ways. One gets a two-way monster who anchors a championship run. The other tanks just enough to land a once-in-a-lifetime prospect. Everyone wins. And it all began with Pop knocking on a hotel room door. For Celtics fans, the message is clear. This wasn't a lucky break. This was a chess move. White was chosen, not discarded. Boston was seen as the right environment, not just a convenient one. And that means more than any stat line. It means Boston is becoming a destination that even opposing legends trust. It means the culture, the structure, the vision is resonating far beyond TD Garden. White didn't just join the Celtics, he was sent there. Like a gift wrapped in playoff potential and long-term value. And if you think his best basketball is already behind him, think again. With Marcus Smart gone, Jrue Holiday aging and Boston constantly adapting, White is quietly stepping into a central role that nobody outside the building seems to be fully grasping yet. The only question now is this: if the Spurs knew how good this could get for Boston, do the Celtics truly understand what they have? Or is White still just scratching the surface of what he can become in green and white? What if Boston's next title run doesn't come from patience, but from pulling the most unexpected trigger in the league? A shockwave rippled through NBA circles when a hypothetical trade emerged, suggesting that the Celtics could make a daring move involving Anthony Simons and DeMar DeRozan. At first glance, it looks like a standard win-now maneuver, but beneath the surface, there's a far more explosive question. Is this the kind of deal that could redefine how Boston keeps its championship window wide open, even with Jason Tatum sidelined? Let's start with the reality. The Kings are desperate. Sacramento hasn't tasted real playoff success since most of today's rookies were in elementary school. They've now assembled a strange trio of Sabonis, Lavine, and DeRozan, a collection of offensive talent that lacks spacing, rim protection, and perimeter defense. Their solution: blow it up before it collapses under its own weight. That's where the Celtics enter the picture. The mock trade proposed by Sports Illustrated has Boston sending Simons and a 2027 unprotected first-round pick to Sacramento for DeRozan and Keon Ellis, while Atlanta gets Sam Hauser and sends Georges Niang to the Kings in a separate but connected transaction. On paper, it sounds wild. In reality, it might be genius. Let's break this open. Boston just traded Jrue Holiday, one of the pillars of their defensive identity. They received Simons in return, a dynamic scorer with high upside but major questions about consistency, playoff readiness, and defensive impact. He's flashy, he's exciting, but is he reliable when it matters most? Now imagine flipping him immediately for DeRozan, a veteran who lives for mid-range chaos, thrives in crunch time, and has been quietly efficient for years. With Tatum injured and likely out for the season, Boston will need a new scoring anchor. Not just someone who can fill in points, but someone who can carry the emotional and strategic weight of big moments. DeRozan isn't just a rental scorer. He's a tone setter. He creates tempo, isolates when plays break down, and gives the Celtics a completely new offensive flavor that doesn't rely on volume threes. You don't win in June by living and dying by the deep ball. You win by having counters. DeRozan is that counter. But here's where the story turns radical. What if Boston isn't afraid to sacrifice development time for Simons? Because they know exactly who they are. What if Brad Stevens sees this roster not as a long-term rebuild, but as a short-term reload with championship intentions? No matter who is missing from the rotation, Boston has a defense-first core. DeRozan wouldn't need to carry that weight. He could be unleashed in a way he hasn't been in years. And consider this. Even if Tatum returns late in the season, DeRozan doesn't complicate things. He complements. He brings a calm, a maturity, a playoff poise that few players outside the All-NBA list possess. With Brown, White, KP, and Horford, this team wouldn't lose its identity, it would refine it. Now let's flip to the Kings. They desperately need a playmaker. Dennis Schroeder is a temporary plug. Anthony Simons could become their lead guard of the future. He's young, explosive, and ready for volume minutes in a lower-pressure environment. Pair him with Lavine and Sabonis, and Sacramento builds a fun, fast team that can at least pretend to defend. It's a risk, but it aligns with their timeline far better than holding onto a 34-year-old DeRozan in a win-now fantasy. What if the Celtics' most surprising move of the offseason wasn't about who they got, but who they let go? Kristaps Porzingis, a player who helped define Boston's title run with his rare blend of size and touch, is now gone, not to the Spurs, not to the Warriors, not to a contender in the West, but to a retooling Atlanta Hawks team that didn't even crack the top 6 in the East last season. And if that seems random, you're not alone. Even Porzingis didn't see it coming. In a recent interview with Sports Studja in Latvia, Porzingis revealed that he fully expected a trade. The writing was on the wall, but what stunned him was the destination. "I thought I might end up with the Spurs," he said. But then Atlanta came in, and that was a nice surprise. Behind the calm tone lies something deeper. A player who expected to join a developmental rebuild under Popovich instead finds himself walking into a team searching for identity. Now stop right there. Why would Boston trade away a 7'3" unicorn who just helped deliver a title? Why move off a player who can stretch the floor, anchor the paint, and dominate mismatches? That's where the shock factor comes in. This wasn't about performance. It was about vision. It was about control. It was about making a brutal, calculated move that might set the stage for a second banner in 2 years. Let's pull back the curtain. Porzingis was set to make over $30 million next season. After the Drew Holiday trade and the upcoming Tatum Supermax extension, Boston's cap sheet was reaching unsustainable levels. The front office saw what few dared to admit. Even championship rosters need a reset button. They chose long-term flexibility over short-term sentiment, and in return, they brought in Georges Niang, a low-cost, high-IQ veteran who fits in without demanding touches. To the casual fan, this looks like a downgrade, but what if it isn't? What if Niang's arrival signals a subtle shift in Boston's identity? One focused not on firepower at every position, but on chemistry, spacing, and bench depth. What if Boston is preparing for a version of the 2025 season where versatility and health matter more than star names? And here's the twist no one saw coming. While Porzingis lands in Atlanta to become a backup center behind a young core, still trying to find its voice, Boston is now fully leaning into its own core. Tatum, Brown, White, KP gone, but the foundation stronger than ever. The Celtics didn't trade Porzingis because he failed. They traded him because they succeeded. Think about that. Championships give you leverage. They give you options. And the Celtics used that power not to run it back blindly, but to build smarter. The risk, massive. Porzingis could thrive in Atlanta. He could stay healthy and drop 20 a night. He could dominate bench units and show flashes of his New York days. But Boston is betting on something else. They're betting that his body can't sustain a full season of deep playoff runs. They're betting that his value, after a ring, would never be higher. And most importantly, they're betting that they can win without him. Porzingis, for his part, seems content. He's healthy. He's playing Eurobasket again. And he's already pitching Atlanta as a team that might be an even better fit than Boston. That's a bold statement, because while Atlanta fights to crack the top 8, Boston remains the team everyone is chasing. It's easy to say you're free from pressure when the expectations have been removed. It's another thing entirely to deliver when everything is on the line. So what does this mean for the Celtics? It means Brad Stevens is not playing checkers. He's managing contracts, load management, and postseason depth all in one move. It means Boston's title wasn't the end, it was a beginning. And it means fans should be watching what comes next very closely.